All right, welcome everyone to Cerius's Leadership IQ series. If you've attended one of these events in the past, welcome back. If you're new here, we're glad that you're here. Simply put, here at Cerius, we build leadership teams for companies large and small in all industries all over the world. We're able to deliver on that promise based on the executives that we have in our network. These are the results-oriented, people-focused leaders that you want in your company. If you are one of those executives, that a value statement makes sense to you and you align with that, there's an entire ecosystem for you here at Cerius to become an even better leader. We have an executive resource page. We're going to drop the link to that in the chat box below. That gives you a number of the resources that you see on your screen here to just hone your skills, align with what you do best. That way you can do that on repeat and just really articulate what you're better at than anyone else on the planet. We also give you the opportunity on calls like this to learn from other executives in the network and to meet people because life's always done better together. If you own or run a business, there's an entire ecosystem for you that we support here at Cerius. I could talk about this for the next 22 minutes, but I'm a little biased as to how we help clients. So there's a link in the chat box for what our clients actually say. It's better if you hear it from them than it is if you hear it from me. Thanks everyone for joining today. This is a continued conversation that we've been having around these 5 key leadership abilities that can help get a company unstuck. We've been having that conversation with EOS implementer Gary Leeman. Gary, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yep. So Gary, we've been talking about this occurrence that companies inevitably face, but it doesn't feel inevitable to them. It often feels surprising to them that things were working in their business, things were going well, it was growing, and then all of a sudden they got stuck, right? And they think it's unique to them. We've worked with a number of clients who, Chris, Gary, you're not going to believe this, but it was working and now it's not. It must be some external thing. It must be the wrong product. It must be, some external thing. And you've been really helpful with our clients and on this series over the last month or so of talking about these key leadership abilities that are honestly the real reason that most companies are stuck. It's a failure within one or many. I know that the recordings are online for everyone else to go back and watch in detail, but just briefly kind of share with us, because I know these things are foundational. We're going to talk about delegating and structuring today, but just kind of walk us through those first 3 and just how they build on each other so that we can talk about today's topic.
Sure. Well, again, thanks, Chris and Kristen and Christine. I'm loving this series. I geek out on operating systems, former COO myself. And so the idea of hitting the ceiling, what you've tried before, what got you here won't get you there. It often is externalized, but there was a study done by Professor Larry Greiner called The Evolution and Revolution of Business, and it showed that every single growing business hits a ceiling. And they go through a period of revolution at that point, and only 3 things happen. They either break through that ceiling, they flatline, or they fail. Like 50% of businesses that start have failed within the first 5 years. So it happens to every single organization. But more than that, it happens to every department at some point. It happens to every leader. So the concept of the 5 leadership abilities is if you can master them and get good at them, you will break through the ceiling. Now, you're going to hit a ceiling and you're going to continue to hit ceilings as you grow. That's not unique. That happens to everybody. But the ability to predict that you're going to hit that ceiling, which is one of the abilities, and then break through it more quickly with a better chance of success to continue to grow. That's where these 5 leadership abilities come in. And they are simplify, predict, systemize, delegate, and structure. We're going to cover delegate and structure today. But very, very quick recap for people who weren't in the first few series. Simplify, that simply means do less better. right? Less is more, right? You have to dumb down an organization. Complexity creeps in every day. And early leaders of companies, leadership teams, founders, they've been in it day in, day out, and they don't see the complexity that grows. It's just entropy is a force of nature. It will continue to tear apart and create chaos, and you always have to simplify. The ability to predict, we discussed. The way we teach it at EOS, long-term prediction is 90 days and out. It's not a 3 to 5 year strat plan, right? That sits on the shelf the instant it's written and then gets reviewed before you get the meeting. Hey, time to do annual planning again. You're like, oh my God, where'd the year go? Right? So that kind of predicting, that's magical thinking. The ability to set rocks or clear targets for 90 days and execute on them. And then the ability to predict what's the most likely issue to derail your company week in, week out and solve it. That's a predict function. Systemize, that just means we believe that there's 7 to 9 core processes that make up your operating system that define how you deliver your product or service, make money, take care of your people, take care of your customers. The ability to document those at a very high level, 20% of the major steps, it gets 80% there, but then get them followed by all, that's a form of simplification. It's also how you create scale, consistency. It's how you reduce errors, improve profitability, and frankly, make things easier to manage, right? And the two that we didn't cover, which I'm excited to talk about today, those are delegate and structure.
You can go to our Cerius YouTube page if you want to see the in-depth conversations Gary and I had around those previous topics. Gary, let's jump right into it. Delegate and structure. How do you see these fitting together?
Well, delegate is based on the concept we know that as your role grows, as your company grows, you tend to take on more and more. You start wearing many hats, and you cannot grow. You can't break through the ceiling until you can essentially create extensions of yourself. That's what delegate is. It's creating extensions of yourself. And it's tied to the concept of elevating. So you delegate to elevate to your unique ability, which is a Dan Sullivan term. It simply means what you love to do and what you're great at doing. That's your highest value for your organization. So the more of your day that you can spend leveraging your unique ability, right, the more value you're going to add to your organization. To do that, you're going to have to continuously delegate those tasks that are not within your sweet spot, right? The way that actually shows up in the organization is through the accountability chart, which is your main tool when you structure the organization. So that's being able to define the roles of your function and other functions throughout the organization so that you can easily start delegating those things that are not either within your particular accountability or that you're not frankly great at or you love to do, right? So there's no way that you're going to break through a personal ceiling, and often you're holding back your department if you're not delegating and elevating the rest of your organization up and elevating yourself.
A lot to unpack there. Let's split them apart. Talk about delegation, because let's get into really detailed on that one topic, Gary, of what should I be delegating? How do I figure out what to delegate? Let's talk through that a bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you something. When I first saw, because we implemented EOS in a startup that I ran, and when I first saw the delegate and elevate tool, it was like, oh, I've been doing it wrong my whole career. Okay. Like, I used to think that the stuff that I didn't like to do, that nobody would, right? And so I should just keep it because I didn't want to pass the buck, so to speak. But that's absolutely backwards, right? So we teach this very simple tool. It's just in 4 quadrants. You identify what you're great at and what you love doing. You identify what you like doing and you're good. Then you've got some stuff you're good at doing you don't really like, but you're good at it. And then there's stuff that you can list that you do not like doing and you're not very good at. And once you structure your world and you think about your activities daily, weekly, monthly, and you break them into a simple 4-quadrant exercise, it jumps right out at the page. There's stuff you're doing every day that you're not very good at and you clearly don't like it, it's sucking the joy out of you. More importantly, it's preventing you from spending the hours in the stuff that you're great at, that you love doing, that's going to fill you up, but really add the most value to your organization. So once you can identify the things that you're not very good at, that you don't love, now it's simply a matter of looking in your organization and going, who can elevate into those roles? Because remember what I said earlier, I used to think, well, that's horrible stuff. Nobody's going to want that. But you know what? I've delegated bookkeeping. And once I raised my hand and said, I'm looking for some help with bookkeeping, there's thousands of people in this world that would love to do my books. I don't get it. I don't know who would love doing bookkeeping and QuickBooks, but they're out there. Structuring the leadership update PowerPoint. Oh, PowerPoint, please. There were people that would leap at the opportunity to get that kind of exposure, to work directly with a leader, right? To spend their time getting all the fonts right. That, forget it. Last thing I want to do is to worry about if the fonts on slide 3 and slide 10 are right. But there are people that have that, eye, and they actually enjoy that work. So that is the concept, is you can identify things, and there are opportunities to grow people in your organization. Now, what you'll often look around, if you haven't been good at this and you haven't been teaching this, you haven't been living this yourself, other people are they're mirroring you, right? You're always on stage as a leader. What you do, people assume, is how things are done in the organization. Right? If you're sending emails out on vacation telling everybody, no, take the week off, but I'm going to work, everyone's going to get the hint. Like, well, I'm going to have to check my email on vacation. Same thing happens with Delegate. If you can't let go of some things, if you can't take the time and train someone up and give them an opportunity, they're not doing it. So when you look around the organization and you think everyone's too busy, well, guess what? They're probably not letting go of the vine. They're probably not delegating either. Right? So it's a very, in practice, simple process. Identify the things you don't love doing, you're not great at. The hard part is, okay, how do I let that go into somebody else the right way so that I can elevate into my unique ability?
I know for me, the first time I did this exercise years ago, Gary, I felt super smart and super hopeful and super dumb at the same time, because I realized how many things were in that lower right-hand box. And as I looked at it, I just if I could get rid of these things, I would just feel better. I would lead better. And what ended up happening was the organization ran better. It's kind of insightful. Even this call that we're on today, this is a lot of fun, what we're doing now. But the editing part afterwards, right? The cutting it up, the applying graphics, not a lot of fun, right? It's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore because that's such a pain, right? All the graphics work and all the things. But as we work through this process, we found people who love it, who have made the graphics part even funner, better. Also, they do it in so much quicker time, right? That I would be able to cut this thing up because it's what they love doing. They take pride in the thing that I despise. Walk me through what happens when we do this at every level of our organization and what that can, the power you've seen it have with clients.
Yeah, Chris, like we've learned, we're two peas in a pod. We have very similar foibles as leaders, right? There is such a tremendous return on investment for yourself, like personally, to start letting go of things that you're not very good at, that you don't like. There's a huge return on investment in an organization because, as you said, somebody else is there. It's going to edit quicker, and they love it. They care about it. They're going to ultimately produce better product. And that's an ego trip, right? You're like, all right, I don't like it, but I'll do it. Like, yeah, somebody's going to do it better. Like, there are people that are going to do those things better than you. So that raises everybody's bar. So what you see in the organization, if you can embrace this and bring it through, is everybody starts to play into the places where they are gifted. They love the work. And we all know that. Like, when you're in your flow, if you will, if you're doing stuff that really excites you and turns you on mentally, you produce better outcome. You produce it faster than others. Now, unfortunately, the world's not so easy that everybody can just do the stuff they love every day, right? But that's why we identify 4 quadrants. Because inevitably you're going to end up doing stuff you don't really like doing, but you're good at it. I can do a project Gantt chart. I can do a good job. I just don't love it. So if I don't have somebody who's chomping at the bit and has the free capacity, it's okay to keep doing some things like that. But if you can get everybody to really get rid of the stuff that crushes their soul, you'll just get a boost throughout the organization, right? And it happens in stair steps, right? This is not an overnight, right, occurrence, but that's what breaking through the ceiling is, right? It's not a magic bullet thing.
So one thing that inevitably happens with our clients over the years when we talk about this topic, right, is they look at that lower right-hand quadrant, things that they're not good at and they don't like, but they have to do. And they say, Chris, Gary, it's not that I wanted to do these things. It's just that no one throughout my organization has the skills to do it, right? I'm doing this because no one can. That's a personal fallacy. Walk us through how to rethink that a bit, because we have to be, as leaders, willing to let some things go, which can be a whole webinar topic in and of itself.
When I experience that pushback, if you will, and it can be from people like myself, solopreneurs, all the way to leaders of companies, 200 employees. It's really an ROI question, right? And sometimes you'll hear, look, it doesn't make sense to bring a CFO in here, right? I don't need another C-level carry that 200,000 base with the bonus and benefits and everything else, right? I think we're just going to keep going with our controller, right? And what I help them understand is, okay, well, what about fractional or interim, right? What about some consulting hours? Get that specialty skill set. Take the forecasting off your controller. They're no good at it. They don't have a background in financial analysis and planning. So bring somebody in to set up your annual plan. Now you have it locked in, and the cost is minimal compared to not doing it correctly, or struggling through as a leadership team with the controller who can't really lead that exercise, right? So go out and pay for it and look at the ROI on that, right? Or myself, let go of the books. I mean, I can ask myself, is that a smart $200 a month? But then I go, well, it frees me up for 6 hours, 8 hours of business development time. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to go out and do a better job, when I'm meeting new clients, if I'm not worried about the books. So there's an obvious return on investment. It may not be like immediate or something you see on the cash flow, but it, right? You inherently know, if I can get 6 hours of my life back to do something that I can really add value to. So I kind of walk people through a couple basic exercises to go, hey, go and make the short investment or the smaller investment to fill that missing piece that you have, right? And get the benefits of doing it like really well quickly for a change.
That's what we do as an interim and fractional firm. I love that answer, Gary, right? Because it's the problem we've been solving for 18 years, right? If you have something in that quadrant, if you have something that you don't have the skill set within the team to do, you don't have to own, you don't have to hire full-time direct 6 figures, right? You can lease that out. You can have an interim come in.
Not only can it be like fractional leadership level, but sometimes you do have a real capacity issue, right? You're not in a position, a cash position to hire a couple extra bodies, right? So sometimes, bringing in a lean consultant and leaning out some processes, right? Do more with less, right? So sometimes it's an indicator that you're not being as efficient as you can, which again, you go back to the leadership abilities. Are you structured correctly? Have you systemized your core processes? Have you simplified? And sometimes bringing someone in that can help you do some of those will free up some additional capacity, and now everybody can do their jobs at their time, right?
Yep. You mentioned structure, which is kind of the next and last step. Once we've done the delegation, once we've really identified highest and best use, right, of our time and our team's time. Let's talk about structure as a concept and what it looks like.
When we talk about structure, it's a forward-looking exercise. All right. So it's you have to drop egos. So we do it without people. We do it without title. And we ask our clients, we ask, what is the best structure of this organization to support the business 6 to 12 months out. So it's forward thinking, and you just essentially ask everybody to go, my name's not going to be on this whiteboard until the end. And it starts with a fundamental belief that every organization has three major functions. You have a marketing and sales function that's generating demand and bringing in, right, new business. You have an operations function that's creating the product or service and keeping the customers happy. You have a finance function, tracking money coming in an organization and adding value to the organization. Every organization has those three functions. Now, some might have an engineering function, some might break marketing and sales into different functions, but we keep it at a functional level. And we started a leadership team, and we do it without titles because that brings ego in, right? So we don't put on a whiteboard VP of sales. It's who's accountable for sales in the organization. We talk about accountability. That's why we call what we build an accountability chart. So when we structure an organization, it's the major functions and the person accountable for the function, not the title, okay? And it's important that one person's accountable because, look, when more than one person's accountable, no one's accountable, all right? I don't know if you're familiar, but the word matrix is from the Latin for does not work.
Yep.
Okay? A matrix organization is anathema to simplicity. If you structure an organization, you're clear on the major functions, you have one person who's accountable. Think about the simplification that brings, right? Everybody's clear on the roles and responsibilities. Everybody knows who's accountable, so you know what throat to choke when things go wrong. All right, so when we structure an organization at a leadership level like that and define the major roles, that's when we put names in the seats. And we ask the simple question, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? So get it is, do they have the background, skills, and experience? Want it? Do they actually want to do that job? Oftentimes when we go through this with clients, somebody raises their hands and be like, I've had this job. I know how to do this job. I don't really want this job, right? Account manager might want to become the customer success manager, right? Your director of finance might want to actually move into account management. Your head of engineering wants to move into the operations team, right? So when you actually ask the question, do you want this seat? It's super important. And then capacity is, do you have not only the time, but do you have like the skill set at a high level to actually do the job? We're working with growing organizations, right? So oftentimes somebody gets it and they want to do the work, but they're slow. They may be like very particular, and you're like, hey, we're more of a get it directionally correct and go. And sometimes that can be a problem, right? So again, you may see some seats in your organization where you're going to have to make some changes, sometimes bringing in external, sometimes consulting, sometimes fractional. Maybe it's a hot mess, and this person, they can kind of partner with somebody and get this organization structured correctly, get the basic process in place, do some training. So if they don't have that capacity, bringing somebody else in, well, then 6 months later, they can own that seat, right? So we let people know, hey, if you don't really get it, want to have the capacity today, it doesn't mean you're fired tomorrow. It just means we know we've got a gap, an organizational gap that we have to solve in structure.
Just from working with a lot of clients, when we talk about their leadership org chart, they almost make it seem like an ancient document that's written in stone, right? We have all these C-level titles, and it is what it is. I'm guessing from just listening to this conversation and the work we've done in the past, you would say that's a much more fluid, something that needs to be reviewed relatively often. And I guess you would apply some of these core principles of Delegate to that structure, right?
Yeah, actually, so at a minimum, it's an annual review, full annual review, whiteboard exercise. Every year, you literally throw it away and go, what do we need 6 to 12 months? If it shows up looking the exact same way, great. But you let go of the past, okay? You let go of the ego. You take the names off the board, you start over. The other way that you identify when it's time to evolve your accountability chart and the structure of your organization, is when what we call right people, right seat issues pop up. So talked about predict. The short-term predicting is running our IDS, which is identify, discuss, and solve issues. Whenever there's an issue that comes up, I like to, as a best practice, go, okay, where does this issue live? Is it a vision issue? Is it a data? Is it in the process component? Right? When you talk right people, right seats, we just put an RPRS, which means it's a structural or a people issue. And guess what? 80% of the organizational problems that you run into are somehow related to people issues, right? So this is an ongoing exercise. You don't relitigate organizational structure every week, but when an issue shows up, maybe the solve is, hey, we're going to have to change a role or change the structure in some way, right? Maybe somebody's span of authority got too big. They can't really effectively manage more than 7 people, and now they have 12 on their team, and it just happened, right? Now it's time to think, well, shoot, they can't really effectively manage 12 people. So it's things like that are ongoing, but once a year, I just say, white paper, just pretend it didn't exist and do the whole thought exercise again. Forward thinking, what do we need 6 to 12 months from today?
So here, this seems super intuitive, this delegation, this structure, when we're mentioning it kind of here on this call, right? Like just the idea of making that delegation list, getting rid of the things that I don't like to do and I'm not good at, and everyone else in the organization is probably asking, why is he doing this stuff? He doesn't like it and he's not good at it, right? That's super freeing. The idea of the kind of the responsibility, the accountability chart, right? Having a review process, super freeing. As we kind of wrap up this conversation, as well as this whole 3-part series, just some key takeaways. One for me, I think, we've worked together, so we've seen this with clients, but I think this has really come through on this call, is that every company has an operating system. It just might be one that isn't serving them well. And I think that's where a lot of getting stuck kind of lands, and what that shows up as. They say, well, we're doing all the things, but the wrong people are doing them in the wrong order. They're too complex. What are some key takeaways from these 5 leadership abilities you want to leave people with?
All of these abilities, kind of they're relatively equal weight, right? So simple's always better. Nobody's beating me in that argument. I'll tell you, I love that debate. Simple's better. It takes a higher level thinking to simplify things. And as a leader, you have to recognize that complexity is constantly creeping your organization. So do less with more. Delegate, elevate. It's such a powerful and simple tool. I'm happy to share that tool with anybody on the call or post it on your website, because it's so intuitive. Once you make your list and put it in the 4 quadrants, you have your plan, right? But if you haven't structured your organization and you haven't systemized your organization, it's going to be really difficult, right? So you kind of have to do all of them, right, to really get the full benefits and break through the ceiling. But you can't get hurt by trying any of them. If you look around the organization, you're like, geez, I don't think our core processes are even known or documented. Well, start there, right? All of this stuff is completely attainable. It's not rocket science. It's designed that way, right? So I don't know. I'd say you can't go wrong with trying your hand at any of these abilities. But when you can start seeing them as a whole, that's when you start talking about, now you have an operating system.
And one that's serving your company well.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. Gary, thank you so much for your time. This has been super helpful, just for us, the clients of ours that you've helped in the past, as well as just the feedback we've gotten from posting this series. You mentioned dropping that Delegate, Elevate information. I just posted a link to a LinkedIn post we made earlier today. For those of you who are on the call, if you would go to that post and you would just comment the most helpful thing that you've gotten from this series, that'll really help us get clarity on what you want to hear moving forward. And then I think the thing that I would leave everyone with, Gary, that I've taken away from this is, when you're looking at your organization and you're looking at these key leadership abilities, don't not make a decision just because you don't have the right talent at this time, right? Identifying is one thing, doing something about it is something else. These core issues in our organization have to be fixed for us to move forward. We can't ignore them any longer. These leadership abilities gives us a framework to solve that. But reach out to someone like Gary, someone like Cerius. If you need some short-term, temporary, fractional help getting through some of these hard conversations, getting through creating some of these processes, all of our clients will say, that's a calling Gary, calling Cerius. That's a call I'm glad we made. I only wish we had done it sooner. These things won't get better by themselves, but they can get better if we're intentional about it and we work through an operating system. Anything before we leave, Gary?
I would just say we know there's 3 outcomes to hitting the ceiling. Continue to grow, flatline, or die. And I know there's only one that I want, right?
Yep. Agreed. Well said. Thanks everyone for being on the call.
Thanks everyone.
Please go to the LinkedIn page and we'll continue the conversation there. See you.